Yes, I have been asked to give some comments on the importance of EU-level guidelines in the arts and artist policies in the Nordic countries. I want to first to emphasize that I have a researcher's perspective on these questions, and just to make it a little bit more clear about what CUPORE is, it's Center for Cultural Policy Research, and art and artist policy is only one of our focus areas. And we have ongoing research that is mainly, we could divide it in 3 different kinds of research projects. And one is the Arts and Culture Barometer, which is an annual survey that has been produced since 2015 on the working conditions, and that has been done in collaboration with the Art Promotion Center, Taike. We also have started the first round of a register-based research that we called As an Artist in Finland. And there we want to define the register-based professional artists, which is a little bit different approach. And that is done in collaboration with the Statistics Finland, the Ministry of Education and Culture, and also Taike, and different kind of artist organizations and grant foundations. There, after that, we also have different kind of thematic projects that are more or less ongoing. One is focusing on the diversity and equity on the sector of arts and culture, and also looking at specifically on the social sector as a working area for artists, and also about the social and psychological well-being at work. That is done together with the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health. So we try to cover a lot of different kind of perspectives on the artist working conditions. Then what comes to the Nordic countries in EU, we try to always to mirror our structures with the Nordic countries, and there is a collaboration between the Nordic countries through the Minister of Council in Copenhagen, and also the Nordic Council. We do have common cultural policy features in the Nordic countries. We are all based on the structures of the welfare state historically. But we do have different operating environments and different kind of national characteristics. So we cannot say that we have a structure that is identical. And we also have to remember that not all Nordic countries are members of the EU. So Finland, Sweden and Denmark are members of the EU, but Norway and Iceland are not. That does not mean that they are not following the processes and working very close cooperation with different kind of EU measures. So there's what comes to the EU regulations I think one of the basic benefits is that you kind of open up the horizon and look at what are the governmental measures of support to the working conditions of artists and professionals in the Nordic countries, and also looking at the legal status, that's a regulation status, not only the practices and traditions. And one of the basic questions that comes very clear in the OMC report, and also was on the list of what is going to be need to be mapping, is the definition of the artist. As we know, the artist is an open profession. Nobody can say that you're not an artist. So anybody could say that they are an artist. So and that is something that also UNESCO in the 1980 status has taken as a point of departure. But of course, we have to narrow it down. Not everybody can be seen as an artist. So maybe the important thing with the OMC report is that it's a more occupationally active person who is identified at least by one of the following legal frameworks of taxation, labor law, social security, and access to public funding. And the question about the professional artist is not absolutely clear. As we come to the larger area of cultural and creative sectors. So we talk about cultural professionals, or professionals in the cultural field. So there is a lot of discussions around that we will not finish with yet. But also the status of the artist is a kind of easy way to put it out, but it's important to say that it's the way in which the professional situation is regulated. So I think it's also one of the basic benefits with this report is that it takes the profession as seriously. So it's not a privilege to be an artist. It's not an honorary mention that, oh, you're so good, you're like an artist. But there must be explicit recognitions of artists, that they should have, like we know, the same kind of adequate and appropriate working conditions as any other professionals. And also it's really important to point out that it is built across different policy sectors. We work with the cultural policy research, but we know it spills over many times over and into different kind of policy sectors. And it's not always that easy to get the dialogue and understandings of labor employment policies, social security systems, and taxation what comes to arts and artist policies. And also these different kind of policy sectors are the various pathways to recognition as an artist what comes to the OMC report. So what do we say about the Nordic model for artist policies then? It becomes also clear in the report, because it's very little said about the Nordic countries in the OMC report. And one point is that we have specific state organizations focused on promoting the arts. Taike we know in Finland, and in Sweden they have Konstnärsnämnden, the Swedish Arts Grant Committee, and in Denmark they have the Danish Arts Foundation. So it's regulated from the top level. So we have these state grant systems, we have awards, etc., that is kind of very long way back in the Nordic countries, as part of the artist policy, as well, part of one of the key questions within cultural policy has been the artist policy systems. But also that we define artistic quality and significance, and through that the artist professionals, through peer review. We don't have a structure that kind of secure your identity as an artist, but it's an ongoing process within the structure of the peer-reviewed applications for grants and so on. And we also have a very strong structure for the artist associations. It's a significant role in all the Nordic countries. And we also have a high level of artist education on the university levels. What comes to the working conditions, I mean, the Nordic countries, as I said, are part of the welfare structures since hundreds of years, or at least 150 years. And also the idea is to have the welfare state emphasis equal treatment, which is also including the practices of artists' conditions. But somehow the intersection between the practices that enables the uniqueness of artistic work, it is always a part of the general equal treatment, as we have heard. So when viewed through this EU framework, the focus tends to be more on general principles rather than practices enabling uniqueness. And the special conditions of the artists and professionals in the creative industries are recognized in different ways in the various Nordic countries. So we have different definitions of who is being talked about and who is speaking. And we have different kind of definitions of the sector of creative industries and creative economy. So instead of having legally defined special status for artists, we have different, various kinds of direct and indirect forms of support. So this is my last slide. What is the significance of the OMC report in the future? Well, we are following it, of course. We are following the seminar on Thursday to see what kind of recommendations that is discussed and what kind of recommendations would be needed. That is really important, both for on the EU level and all the states, member states. And of course, we are, as in CUPORE, we are really interested in seeing how it affects the research on art and artist policies. And we do know that there is a lot of more knowledge needed, even if you look at the Nordic environment. So we have a discussion with the Nordic colleagues to develop the cooperation between all these countries to follow up the research on it. And I think it's really interesting to see what kind of, to what extent does the uniqueness of artists and arts appear in the cultural policies today. Because I have a feeling that it can be a little bit flowing away. And will be very interesting to follow the discussions what comes. Thank you.